which we will be highlighting some of the policies and programs that this government is executing, which we have views on, and also at the same time preferring policy alternatives in due course to some of the issues that we'll be raising. This morning, I want to start by introducing a team from the party's Finance and Economy Policy Committee, chaired by the Honorable Amin Adam Anta, MP for Karaga and former Minister for Finance and Economic Planning. The Honorable Gideon Boakon, MP for Tano North, will be joined shortly by the Honorable Abena Osayasari, MP for Atiwa East and Chairperson Public Accounts Committee. Dr. Frank Bano, who is the spokesperson for the Committee on Finance. The Honorable Issa Foseni, who is a co-spokesperson for the committee, and Dr. Kwesi Nyamibefi, who is secretary to the Policy Coordination Committee. Ahead of the 2026 mid-year budget review, the New Patriotic Party's Policy Committee on Finance and Economy has been meeting and poring over the latest published data on the Ghanaian economy. And as a responsible opposition party, we are obliged to share with the nation our findings and also obliged to draw the attention of the government to key worrying signals that we are observing. And our presentation this morning is in three parts. First, the props, or what is known as the settings, that the government is employing to achieve the macro numbers that it is publishing and the effects of these props or settings. Second, we'll be speaking about the sustainability of these props or settings that they are using. And thirdly, we'll be speaking to the subject of some outstanding key development issues that the government is failing to tackle. So let's start off with the fiscal space question and how they are manufacturing data on what they call the surplus. Now, on Thursday, for sure, the government will tell the country that Ghana has moved from stability to growth. Our task today is to lay out what the government's own published data actually shows, not the headline or narrative they are putting on it, but what the data actually shows. How the headline numbers are being manufactured and whether they can last, and what they have cost the ordinary Ghanaian. And we'll put three tests to this review. And the first is the quality of the 2025 surplus. Now, the government will cite a 2025 primary surplus of 2.6% of GDP on a commitment basis against a target of 1.5%. And they would seek to tell the Ghanaian people that that means that they are managing the fiscals prudently. But we want to sound a caution ahead that it's important to look underneath these numbers. You will find that revenue has missed the revised target by about 4.7%, and the surplus was delivered because expenditure was compressed by 13.8% of GDP. In plain language, the government did not outcollect its target. It rather underspent its expenditure targets. Savings from delayed capital execution are not structural reform. They are only a postponement of things that they will have to do at the end of the day. The second issue is something that the first quarter of 2026 confirms as a pattern. Now, the government's own data, through what the Bank of Ghana has just released ahead of the MPC, shows that first quarter spending is about 62 billion against a target of 78 billion. That is 21.2% below target. Capital expenditure is 41% below target. This is a government that says that its focus is a big infrastructure project out of which it will create 800,000 jobs. And they are 41.9% below target on capital expenditure. Foreign finance projects is about 0.6 billion Ghana cedis out of 5.3 billion Ghana cedis. Goods and services, 35% below target. Grants to health, education, and the districts is about 19% below target. And the only thing that they've been able to protect is the wage bill. And that is why the independent analysts are calling this the weakest first quarter execution of any budget since 2017. Roughly about 24 billion Ghana cedis unexecuted in 3 months. And that is roads, schools, and hospitals that had to carry the cut. The third part of this argument is that the arrears problem that this government first complained about and tried to paint the NPP black on, the arrears problem is not gone away. The finance minister himself, if you recall, in 2025, reported that they had discovered arrears of about 67 billion Ghana cedis. And he used that to adjust the primary balance at the time. And you recall the minority at the time saying that that was very, very inappropriate. Now, he subjected it to an audit. The audit came back and proved that his 67 billion was false, and that indeed what he could only even attempt to claim was 45 billion. And I'll come to a second point on that one. And by the way, that 45 billion was because they just went around asking anybody who says that government owes them to bring forward a claim. Now, against this 45 billion, the 2025 budget allocated only 13 billion to settle some of it. And by November 2025, the road sector alone reported that they have now got a backlog of close to about 40 billion Ghana cedis arrears. So if the audited claim ended at 45, and they claimed they were going to pay about 13 billion, and now the road sector alone is talking about 40 billion still, the minister now says only 11.5 billion has been cleared, and no new payables have accrued. The maths doesn't math. What is the true stock of arrears, and which sectors are driving it? And when cash is tight, is it the arrears clearance itself that is being squeezed? And by the way, bear in mind that this arrears stock, as I mentioned, was because they went around asking everybody to add up. The proper arrears stock has always been on the gift me. So when he comes tomorrow, he has to tell us which database he's using for his new arrears calculation. Is he using the same formula he used in 2025? Or he's going back to gift miss, in which case he'll be comparing apples and oranges. And we believe we need to draw your attention so that all of us examine this in detail. Finally, on this first argument that we've been making about the settings that they are using, the revenue engine of our republic is faltering. The first quarter revenue missed the program target by about 4.5%. Oil revenue fell from about 19.8 billion Ghana cedis in 2024 to 8.7 billion Ghana cedis in 2025. And first quarter oil receipts this year were about 37.6% below target. Does the 268.1 billion cedis full year revenue target still stand, Mr. Minister? Or are you going to revise it downwards? And if it still stands, from where are you going to close this gap without new distortionary taxes on households and businesses? It's important that we all keep an eye on this figure, the revenue figure that Parliament has approved. And as he delivers the mid-year review tomorrow, we ask ourselves, with all of this underperformance, is he going to review the revenue target downwards? Or if he's keeping it, then the question is, where are they going to close the gap from? Because if it is not closed, they cannot spend on the promises that they have made. The question hanging on Thursday is the surplus a policy achievement or a reporting artifact of budgets that were simply not executed? On the evidence, ladies and gentlemen, we are clear that it is the second. Fiscal space created by under-execution is not true fiscal space. It's only a deferral of things that you still have to do at the end of the day. And you'll recall quite recently, we were reminded in a very sad way when, for example, expenses that needed to be made on flood control programs were not done. In the end, when the floods came, we saw the number of people who perished. So fiscal space that is created by under-execution is not fiscal space. The real cost is there for the people to pay. Now let's go to the second part of our three-part conversation. How durable are these settings that they are embarking on? When the props are removed, what will happen at the end of the day? And here, I'll treat it in a number of parts. First, what's going on the IMF? The IMF Executive Board is expected to approve the final ECF review and the new policy coordination instrument around the 27th of July. That's 4 days after the minister will read the mid-year review. Note that the PCI is a non-financing instrument that the government has gone for, still under the IMF. Now, choosing to remain under fund supervision without fund money is an admission that an external anchor is still required for this economy. And the fund's own May statement flags state-owned enterprises, contingent liabilities, quasi-fiscal activities, and gold price over-reliance as continuing risks to the Ghanaian economy. And that's the real reason for which this government has now gone under a PCI, even though the ECF has ended. Now, the second point is that the growth story that we are seeing is on gold. It's not based on any policy. The government will tout the first quarter growth of about 6.4% to say that, the economy is performing, it is rebounding, there's higher growth. This is how they hope to make the argument that we have moved from stability to growth. But go into the details. Industry's growth rate jumped from 1.9 to 6.9%, yes, in one quarter. But if you double click, it shows you that it's on the back of gold mining and export earnings hitting a record $31.1 billion in 2025. Why? Because of historically high gold prices. Now, let me refresh your memory. In 2025, when the minister read the 2024 review and realized that there had been growth in the economy, mostly led by gold, I'm sure you recall what he said. He said that it was galamsey growth. So today, as they are going to hinge their growth numbers on gold, it is fair to say that what is going on is just galamsey accounting, which they will be touting as growth. If gold returns to its 5-year average price, what will our growth figure be? What will the trade surplus be? What will the primary balance be? Where will they get forex to continue pumping onto the market? And now that matter has been established. We started talking about it in the first quarter of 2025. They disputed it. Now the jury is clear on it. The review that the minister will publish tomorrow must answer this sensitivity analysis, else we are living on borrowed time. The third issue under the second pillar, inflation is beginning to turn and the cedi is beginning to slip. Falling headline inflation never means falling prices. Prices have been rising, only more slowly. And now they are rising faster again. 3 consecutive months, and it's increased to 5.3% in June, the highest since December 2025. And it's driven mostly by fuel costs from the Middle East conflict. Today, Brent crude is averaging about $91 per barrel. You recall in 2022, at the peak of the economic crisis, when crude was about $120, and we kept explaining that that was the real driver of inflation, they said ours was untrue. Today, it's inching up, mostly driven by fuel cost by the Middle East conflict. Meanwhile, the cedi is also depreciated between 8.4 and 10.3% this year, depending on the data source that you are using. Now, you will notice that apart from the debt restructuring that the NPP government did, which led to outright cancellation of about $5 billion of Ghana's debt and cash flow savings of about $4.7 billion, cumulatively, which contributed significantly to a reduction in our debt to GDP ratio, the other part of our debt improvement came from an appreciation of the currency last year. What the currency gave, the currency is now beginning to take back. I'm sure when the Bank of Ghana put out the data, you notice that our debt in cedi denomination is now gone up by about 40 billion Ghana cedis. The appreciation that they touted as a great thing and later counted back as showing that we had improved in our debt numbers in cedi denomination is now going back. And that's mostly why you are seeing this over 40 billion cedi increase in our debt stock. Issue number 4, the government's own debt numbers do not agree with each other, depending on which of their data sources you are looking at. Now, the Bank of Ghana is reporting that debt is roughly about 45% of GDP now, as of June. The IMF is also projecting that it will get to 53% before the end of this year. Now, given that Ghana's program with the IMF projects debt to GDP ratio to reach 55% of GDP by the end of 2028, the increased borrowing that we are seeing today means one thing, that this target by the end of 2028 is already at risk. And thus tomorrow the minister must present a proper debt sustainability analysis to convince the people of Ghana that all the sacrifice and the work that the people of Ghana went through to reduce our debt burden is not in vain. Colleagues, I'm sure you recall that just yesterday in Parliament, they came for nearly $1 billion approval. And so already the debt target by 2028 is at risk. The government should not try to hide this reality in the impending rebasing of the GDP. We will fish it out and we'll calculate for you pre-rebasing and post-rebasing what the new debt to GDP will be, looking at the way they've started debt accumulation just 9 weeks after the IMF left town. But it even raises a bigger question. What does the IMF know that the government is not telling Ghanaians? What is included and excluded, and on what GDP base? The review must publish one reconciled figure and one methodology. Issue number 5, the Bank of Ghana's balance sheet is a fiscal time bomb, colleagues. The Bank of Ghana reports a 2025 loss of 15.6 billion in one instance, and then if you add the other 19 billion together, about 34 billion. And we have argued that if you net off the one-off gold sales, it brings you to about 44.5 billion. Now, independent analysis puts the negative equity roughly around 96 billion Ghana cedis. That's about 8% of GDP. The IMF has named the domestic gold purchase program as a driver of these losses, and recapitalization is promised by 2032. That liability, for example, is sitting outside the budget, but it will demand real fiscal space tomorrow. The minister will need to start answering the questions on that one tomorrow. Every city of it is a road that is not built, it's a classroom that is not funded. And finally, let me speak to the issue of what the Bank of Ghana is now confirming, despite the fact that the majority in Parliament doesn't want them to speak in public. Yesterday, at the opening of the 131st Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the governor announced that the central bank has ceased pre-financing of the Gold Board's gold purchase program, effective the 1st of July. Let me refresh your memories once again. For months, the minority in Parliament warned that this financing was an unbudgeted quasi-fiscal operation exposing the state to huge losses. We were dismissed. Our motions for investigations were dismissed. At the time, the IMF quantified it at $214 million lost on the Gold for Reserves program. This was around September 2025. By the end of the year, the Bank of Ghana account itself shows that it was around $900 million. That's about the 9.6 billion Ghana cedis that they talk about in their report, which report the finance minister has still not laid before Parliament. Now, those figures were disputed loudly. Now, just yesterday, without apology, the bank has announced that it will stop the financing. This is too little, too late. The losses have already been booked onto the balance sheet in between the 15 billion, the 19 billion, and the cumulative 96 billion underwater. Stopping the bleeding, unfortunately, does not restore the blood. And mark our words, the governor has begun the confession. Soon, the finance minister too will come before this country confessing what we have been saying all along. And very finally, we want to speak about the credibility of some of the promises that they are making going forward. And here, I'll treat it in 4 major parts. Announcements. We celebrate a lot of announcements that the finance minister makes when he announces them, and we see a lot of headlines. When you go into the details of what has actually been released and executed, it's very disappointing. In June, the finance ministry said it released 1.6 billion Ghana cedis to agriculture. The Agric ministry put the authorization at rather 910 million Ghana cedis. And then they further argued that even disbursement was lower at 453 million Ghana cedis. Right to information reports indicate 76 to 90% of the big push road contracts worth over 70 billion Ghana cedis are sole sourced. And when the country was assured that payment will not be a problem, we are now finding out that capital execution, as I have already explained to you, is only about 58% of target. So money is a problem. So when announcements are made, that's not what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at the cash releases because they tell 2 different stories. It is the cash release that tells the truth. The second is that the jobs numbers are audio announcements. They are in the pipeline. They are not on the payroll. The 24-hour economy promised about 1.7 million jobs. Its direct 2026 allocation is 110 million Ghana cedis. They now claim that they've created about 160,000 jobs and signed some MOUs, but they are not operating projects. And the totals lean on multipliers of 1 to 4. And if you look at the detail of the 160,000 jobs that they are claiming out of a number of filling stations that they say are operating 24 hours, it's laughable. You all know that filling stations were operating in this country before the NDC came to power. So to claim that about 300 or so filling stations are operating 24 hours as evidence of a functioning 24-hour economy program and 160,000 jobs announced out of it is laughable. A memorandum of understanding is not a pay slip. In cocoa, a producer price of 41,000 cedis per ton was announced in February, yet farmers reportedly remained unpaid even as at March, despite a pledged $337 million disbursement. So they announced one thing, but the reality on the ground is another. Let's also talk about the unfinished business the government inherited and has still not dealt with. When the previous administration left office, approximately 98% of all debt eligible for restructuring had been negotiated. The domestic debt exchange restructured $20 billion equivalent and delivered debt service savings. The Eurobond restructuring is what delivered the stock reduction, over $5 billion. Yet, nearly 2 years on, the remaining 2%, just 2%, somebody did 98%, you are left with 2% to do. 2 years on, that 2%, about $2.7 billion, is still unresolved under this government. And where are the promised independent fiscal council, the debt management office, and other institutions? Have they been abandoned or delayed or quietly shelved? Or the new fiscal council, we saw an announcement that the new fiscal council has been put in place. Have they been cowed into silence already, as other critical voices are being cowed into silence by this administration? The fourth issue is that borrowing has already begun. Just 9 weeks after the IMF ECF ended, and even before the IMF board considers the last ECF review, the executive is in parliament asking for nearly $1 billion. The minority will scrutinize every PESWA, per post terms and collateral, and where each CD will actually go. Finally, we think that Thursday's presentation must disclose a few things with numbers and not just assurances. First, the actual half-year execution line by line against allotment, and we'll be asking, did the first quarter pattern persist or did it reverse? Second, a full decomposition of the primary surplus, structural revenue, gold windfall, expenditure compression, valuation effects, and one-offs. Third, one reconciled debt to GDP figure and the methodology they are using for it. Fourth, a current audited arrears stock with a credible payment schedule tied to actual allocations. Number 5, verified payroll employment for the Big Push and the 24-hour economy program, and project-level Big Push procurement disclosure. Number 6, the true loss figure and the resolution plan for the Bank of Ghana. Remember, as we've mentioned, the minister has not presented it to Parliament. A team of NDC persons came to Parliament to do a press conference and understated it at 15 billion when it's actually 34, and if you take away the one-off gold sales, it's about 44. So the true figure must now be published. 7th, sensitivity analysis on gold prices, fuel costs, and the city. And number 8, the status of the Fiscal Council and the Independent Debt Management Office that was promised, as well as a refinancing plan for the growth agenda that names its sources. And here, let me make this point. The minister has already started sounding the market that he's going to announce some new strategies tomorrow. Mr. Minister, there's a mid-year review to assess performance. Policies have already been announced and funded. Any new policy will just be more settings, props, and audio announcements because they are unfunded. Already, you are struggling to fund the announced policies and promises. Desist from the temptation to announce new cities, new policies, and new projects. Ladies and gentlemen, A country cannot build growth on unspent budgets, unpaid contractors, disputed debt numbers, and jobs that exist only on paper. On Thursday, the NPP, through its minority in parliament, will be in the chamber, measuring the minister's statement line by line against this government's own published data. The Ghanaians deserve numbers and not narratives. We thank you, and we'll take your questions at this point. Okay. Mentra na me mbɔ tofa kakra wo twi mu. Enuanom yɛda mo ase sɛ anɔpɛ mu abɛka yɛn sa wɔ ha sei. Megina NPP Policy Coordination Committee na na mu ɛna medi nkyia kɛse ɛbrɛ mu. Ɛnɛ yɛne Policy Committee on Finance and Economy ɛna ahyia wɔ ha sei. Na wɔtwe ne bosumi ahodoɔ ɛda yɛnim ne yɛbɛhyiahyia. Na nnwuma ahodoɔ a policy committees na fi ase yɛ no yɛde bi ato abɔnten. Na yɛhyia ya Ghana sikasɛm ho the aboni be friend data no kra wo mu a Bank of Ghana publish bi o ha Finance Ministry publish bi o ha World Bank IMF publish no eno na yempani fo na do mu asuko a de aye hunu ye de beto abonten ansa na ochina Finance Minister aba be kan ni media review edikan ne ye hu se omo de intricacies bebre ena omo de announce numbers bi e ma ne ye nkofo de se Ghana economy no asesan so wa woni mu abrabom sika na wo se ba aban akache na omo de abo yakọ homa no se sika no aban sisi ye no ne nsa nka enu nti no enema ahodo wo sa aban etua kama ye no ontumi ntua nti no ukohwe nkrata mu wo se o the friend primary balance ana oman no sikeda ho no eho aye fefefe so no kra ne se ontua ne ma bebre wo se otua contractor fo ahodo a ontua enema ahodo de ne nsa aka ono aka so be ya ontua no ni na eda yanim etoso mienu ontua sa ne ma we san se ni sika mbanti no se we fi ase e bobesia akese no a wo hwe Bank of Ghana data na yeka edikan pagya over 40 billion Ghana cedis eno da chen kra no ankra o sign by parliament say yensa ma no $1 billion almost $1 billion boso mi nkunu mpani a IMF eja ne ho no se ade na fi ase ejigu a wa start bobesia be $1 billion na de twato a yeka ho asem ne se we nyina nkangu nchen no ne bo sha hodo ka se obedi so no oni so the 24-hour economy oka say obehwe no waye no mfia be mienu ni after sika ye de amane nyina no untumi hu NDC chairman ba ko ne bapo enye adwuma 24-hour economy no emu ana NDC women's organizer ne baba akopo enye adwuma e 24-hour economy no emu nso aban ya manu sika 650 billion mfia mienu ye di kan ya total appropriation we free SHS Nana Akufo-Addo Dr. Bawumia dija na Nana Akufo-Addo Dr. Bawumia anko bob besia fanye free SHS and no abidina parliament so here besia $300 million e de akwa akoye free SHS eho adwuma ne niam ahodo disi na nisu so be nkokon nketenkete no aba baji atum se nkofo okum nkokon ye den ewe niam ahodo bebre oka so be no ontumi nye nti dia yesre finance minister ne se ochina obegina parliament a enya afi na oba beto anansesem a kire yen data na Bank of Ghana and Finance Ministry IMF ni World Bank a publish no eno no nka mu no kure nye ho no be announcement foforo isan say policies ne de wedi kan announce ne mum akohomasika na onya ntua nya afi na obe announce policy foforo ba ko na o announce ye na onya ho sika entua no on kire yen kwan obenya ho sika etua mano sisa medamose colleagues. So we'll take your questions and depending on which of our subcommittees at the finance level these questions are directed to, I will deal with some. I'll invite some of my other colleagues to also deal with some. Yeah, so we'll take a few. If you don't have questions too, we can end it here. Questions? Yes, sir. City.
What does it mean really for the Bank of Ghana to say that it is not going to fund them? And again, we've heard from government that the good work essentially, with all the costs that are incurred, is essential for the sort of stability that the economy has experienced and for which government is seeking to push for growth.
So I would give a preliminary response. I'll invite any of my colleagues who feel moved by the Spirit to join me. Well, first of all, if the Bank of Ghana says it will no longer fund gold boards, gold purchase program, the question is why? The answer is that they have made significant losses on it. In September, when we sounded the alarm, the loss was around $214 million. And we asked for a probe, and you recall that they blocked the probe in Parliament. By the end of the year, it had risen to about $900 million. I'm sure you know what $900 million can do. How many Agenda 111 hospitals it can complete so that nursing students can be recruited, doctors can be recruited, lives can be saved. How many contractors could have been paid so that they will continue with stalled projects in different parts of the country. $900 million is a lot of money. But because they refused and they pretended it wasn't happening, that's where the loss went to. Between January and June, they were still continuing. We are still computing what even that extra loss is. We'll give you that figure as we go along. But now the Bank of Ghana is confirming that what we said was true. And so they will no longer bear this loss. The government and the gold board will need to tell us how they are going to finance this loss, because the structure they are running, if you buy gold at a premium price and sell at the world market price, you will make losses. So who is going to bear that loss? Is it the gold board or is it the finance ministry? They have to tell us where that loss will go. And what we have to do is to ask what the opportunity cost of that loss is, what else that money could have been used for. Millions of young Ghanaians who are looking for jobs, if this money could not have been put into some initiatives which would have given them jobs. So we are waiting for them to tell us where they will move that loss to. But when the governor appeared in Parliament a few days ago and they blocked the media from covering, one of his written answers explained that what is really anchoring the city is not the gold board. It is the domestic gold purchase program. So even that narrative that they tell you, that, this government likes a lot of settings and PR narrative. That narrative they tell you that is the gold board. The governor's answer shows clearly that that is not true. And this is why they don't want you to hear from the governor himself. Colleagues, I don't know if anybody wants to add something to it. Dr. Amin.
Well, thank you, Chairman. You put it rightly. But we have to put this stability in context. When they say because of gold balls rule, they have brought stability, and therefore Ghanaians should accept the cost of that stability. You can achieve stability without incurring the kind of losses that we saw under Gold Board and the Bank of Ghana. And I'll give you some examples. The inflation that we are talking so much about, by the end of 2022, the inflation rate was 54%, if you recall. 54%. And we all understood the circumstances. The war was a factor because it challenged global logistics movement, imported inflation, and many other reasons. 54%. By the end of 2024, it had come down to 23%. That is a decline by 31 percentage points. They have brought it to today, what? About 5%. So if a government that brought inflation from 54% to 23%, 31 percentage point decline, can a government that brought it from 23% to 5% say it did better? Can that government say that it did better? One government brought it from 54% to 23%, a decline by 31 percentage points. And the other brought it to now 5% from the 23%. That's about 18% or so. 18 percentage points. But we did it without incurring the losses that we are incurring today. So you cannot tell me that Ghanaians should accept the losses because it brought stability. Another government brought down the inflation by more than what you did without incurring those losses. So that cannot be, accepted. I also talk about the depreciation itself, depreciation of the cedi. By the end of 2022, the cedi was depreciating at 52%. You remember when we said that Ghana had lost the international capital market? The cedi was depreciating by 52%. By the time we left government in 2024, by the end of 2024, the cedi was depreciating by between 18% to 20%. So the government that brought the depreciation of the cedi from 52% to about 18-20% did not incur such losses. How can they then come and say that because of the losses incurred by the Bank of Ghana, we now have the stability? But another government achieved, greater stability without incurring those losses. We talk about reserves. Today they are talking about $13 billion. Before we left government, we had built the reserves through the Bank of Ghana to the tune of $9 billion. We handed over $9 billion in international reserves to them. We didn't incur those losses. So when you talk about stability and therefore the huge cost of $900 million is justified because of that stability, I don't think Ghanaians, will just accept this. They must give us proper explanation. And I tell you, is it that they don't want the stability again if the Bank of Ghana is now announcing that they will cease the pre-financing of gold purchases? They don't want the stability again. They still want the stability. So why will they stop the financing of gold board? Already inflation has inched up from 3.4% to 5.3%. We are losing it. The cedi, which was appreciating in 2025, remember they said the cedi appreciated by about 40%. From the beginning of 2026 to date, the cedi has depreciated by about 8%. Depreciated by 8%. It's no longer appreciating the appreciation we saw in 2025. Today, it is depreciated by 8%. And if you go to the market, by more than 10%. Don't they want the stability again? So why are they stopping the financing of the gold board purchases? And so let's don't take this explanation, which I think is below the belt.
Thank you. We'll take another round of questions. By the way, when Dr. Amin talked of reserves, the Bank of Ghana data shows that in the last about 2 to 3 months, our reserves have lost about $1.2 billion. The minister needs to explain to us where those reserves have gone. Have they used it for market intervention, i.e. pumping on the market, which they have now coined a new phrase for, which they call market intermediation, or what? Where is the $1.2 billion of our reserves going to? Colleagues, I'll take a final batch of questions, if there are any. Final batch of questions, if there are any. Medase, NPP abanseni amonim no obabemu January 7th, 2017. September na no fiase eye ni free SHS. Na NPP aban de okan ni say free SHS ya de a ehia so man no ankasa ma ne ye na hia sem. Nti oman no di ni sika o sese ni me di kan penifo se ye di ehia ansa na ye de eden e fata. Ti oman ne sese ni ehia a e wo so ya free SHS di mu akotene wo so de oman ne sika ye. Nti mfie nwotwe a ye tena aban mu no ya nkobo besia se ye de service besia ne na e be free SHS. Ye de Ghana sika annual budget funding amount a fi ye mineral resources ni mu ena na ye di tua free SHS nka. Fofia Antoata NDC a oka say first of all double track nti wo hwe ya omo party chairman announce say double track say within a year omo betumi a year free ho. Fofia Antoata and NDC aban say ohia be $300 million besia fi World Bank and sana ni bosha or shefa free SHS ho no wetumi ediso se kosa bi wo hwa e bebisa omo na wo se ebisa om se ne ba ne sen ena ade a mo se mo nyade a mo beche ho kra be afe mo wo akwaniasan betumi afaso na motumi asolve de amususu se e problem wo ho no ba ne sen ne de ba ya mo ba beje besia $300 million for free SHS and no kire wo se NDC aban no mo to opposition na o mpetumi a the ombeka bia ne the ombeka omba bemu na to matase atase ebi na sabri ato me no omba parliament no kekesi ani a na wotwe be yankunu pe after IMF ECF ne NDA no omba ba parliament say yemma sika okeka bomu a ekeka ko be $1 billion. IMF board no crampo en review last ECF no enwie no me fi ase e bobusia foforo nti omom jejereje pam so say question foforo bi o ho a ye be take answer na ewie. Sure.
So you also recall that last week or so, the government announced that they have reached the final stage of the debt restructuring, and that the debt restructuring was coming to an end. A lot of you media houses carried that story. But what you didn't do was to ask for the details. Before the NPP government left, as the Honorable Kojo Opong Nkrumah said, we had concluded 98% of the debt restructuring. The remaining 2% amounted to $2.8 billion. That is what was left for them to also do. But what have they done? I know that they've reached an agreement with Afrexim about $700 million. The Sedera exchange of notes, the one they said they have reached the final stage, it's just about $117 million. So if you have left $2.8 billion with them, and they've done $700 million with Afrexim, $117 million with Sedera, what is left? You still have about $2 billion of debts yet to be restructured. Now, this government says they are good, they are efficient. A government that did 98%, you say they are bad. And the 2% left for you to do, 2 years, almost 2 years now, they haven't been able to do it. And so, media people, when they publish something, when they announce something, let's interrogate it. But everybody was carrying. Government has come to the end of the debt restructuring. They have reached the final stage with the exchange of notes between government and Sedera. That is not the final stage. There is still about $2 billion that they have not been able to negotiate. And that's the difference between the NPP government and the NDC government. We deliver. They do propaganda. Because why will you announce you have come to the end when you know that you still have $2 billion of the eligible debt to be restructured? The last point I would like to mention is that the energy sector, if you recall, in the 2026 budget statement, the Minister for Finance announced that they had spent $1.47 billion to clear the energy sector debts. Again, most of you media houses, you carried it. Government clears energy sector debts. When you say clear energy sector debt, it means that you have repaid all debts outstanding in the energy sector. But that was the word used. Again, you didn't interrogate them. What do you mean by cleared? But you all carried it. That's the propaganda. Indeed, the World Bank has projected that by the end of this year, 2026, the debt in the energy sector will reach $9 billion. $9 billion. If the reforms, the energy sector reforms, the government is supposed to implement have not been implemented. What does that mean? The same World Bank 2 weeks ago gave a damning verdict on this government's implementation of the same energy sector reforms. You published it. The World Bank said that the implementation of the energy sector recovery program was unsatisfactory. Unsatisfactory. That is the word used by the World Bank on this government's implementation of the energy sector reforms. And by their failure to implement the energy sector reforms, debts are accumulating. As I speak to you, fuel debts that have accumulated is quite huge. So what debts have they cleared? Why would the debts end at $9 billion United States dollars by the end of 2026? And so the minister should use the review budget tomorrow to tell the Ghanaian public why they failed to implement the energy sector reforms and what measures they are going to put in place. They call themselves reset government, to reset the implementation of the reforms and bring these reforms on track so that we avoid doomsday. Otherwise, the doomsday we all don't like and we pray against, this government is going to bring it back. Because the debts that have accumulated will compel them to give up the proper management of the energy sector. And so these are some of the questions we want them to answer. If under an IMF program, you have failed to implement the energy sector reforms, then what will happen now that we are not under an IMF program? And this is why I say sometimes that the IMF went to sleep. When this new government came into government, the IMF went to sleep. Because they have failed to hold this government accountable to the policies and reforms that they are supposed to be implementing. And this is why they have opted for the PCI, to continue to be under IMF surveillance and supervision, because they haven't implemented the reforms they are supposed to implement. And so thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. You are not done with the questions. I think we are done. One question for Honorable Amin. Please, we are fine. We are fine. We are done. Thank you, friends from the media, for coming. We are going to get you a signed copy of the statements. Once it is ready, I will forward them to you. And also, we will share with you media directory as to which people you can contact for interviews. Specific people.